Imagine walking into a dealership and finding a brand new electric car priced at roughly $10,000. It already includes advanced driver assistance technology that some competitors still charge between $3,000 and $15,000 to unlock. Now, imagine that the company behind that car has also introduced a 1,000-volt platform capable of adding around 400 kilometers, or nearly 250 miles, of driving range in just 5 minutes. That company is BYD. And when Elon Musk saw how far BYD had come, his reaction was reportedly just one word: impressive. But the real threat is not one cheap electric car, one charging breakthrough, or even one rapidly growing Chinese brand. The real threat is that BYD may have discovered a fundamentally cheaper and faster way to build cars, one that Ford, General Motors, Volkswagen, Toyota, and other legacy automakers cannot easily copy. By the end of this video, you will understand where BYD's enormous cost advantage actually comes from, why tariffs may only delay the problem, and what traditional automakers must change before 2035 if they want to remain globally competitive. So subscribe for more in-depth analysis of the companies and technologies reshaping the auto industry. Because to understand why BYD has become such a serious threat, we first need to look at the scale of the shockwave it has already created. In the first quarter of 2024, BYD sold roughly 416,000 battery electric vehicles. That is more pure EVs than the entire United States market sold during the same period, at approximately 350,000 units. Let that sink in. One Chinese automaker is now producing and selling electric vehicles at a scale larger than an entire national market that includes Tesla, Ford, General Motors, Hyundai, Rivian, and nearly every other major brand competing in America. The easy explanation is to call this price dumping. Others will point to government subsidies or claim Chinese cars are simply built cheaply. Those explanations may sound comforting, especially to legacy automakers, but they miss the deeper problem. BYD is not winning only because it can sell cars for less. It is winning because it has redesigned how a car company manufactures, sources, develops, and scales technology. This is a structural manufacturing revolution, and it threatens the survival model of automakers that still operate through layers of suppliers, outsourced engineering, and expensive legacy factories. The question is no longer whether BYD can compete with the world's largest automakers. The question is whether those automakers can rebuild themselves quickly enough to compete with BYD.
Inside BYD's 35% cost advantage. To understand BYD's advantage, start with one concept: vertical integration. Most traditional automakers do not manufacture everything inside the vehicle. They design the car, manage the brand, assemble major components, and purchase thousands of critical parts from outside suppliers. Those suppliers may provide batteries, semiconductors, motors, glass, electronics, software modules, seats, steel components, and dozens of other systems. BYD takes a very different approach. It produces many of its own microchips, electric motors, batteries, automotive glass, steel components, and even seat foam. Instead of depending on a long chain of companies, BYD controls much more of the vehicle within one industrial ecosystem. That level of control creates several advantages at once. First, it removes layers of supplier profit margins. Every outside supplier must cover its own research, factories, labor, logistics, risk, and profit. When multiple suppliers contribute to one vehicle, those margins accumulate. BYD can absorb more of those functions internally and reduce the final cost of the car. Second, it gives BYD more control over production speed. A design change does not always require months of negotiation with an outside company. Engineering, component production, and assembly can work more directly together. Third, it reduces vulnerability during a crisis. The global chip shortage during the pandemic was a stress test for the entire auto industry. Ford, General Motors, and major European automakers were forced to slow or stop production because they could not secure enough semiconductors. Vehicles sat unfinished while assembly lines lost billions of dollars in output. BYD was better positioned because it produced many of its own chips. It was not completely isolated from the global crisis, but it had more control over a component that had become one of the industry's biggest bottlenecks. Then there's the blade battery. Traditional battery packs often group cells into modules, then place those modules inside the final pack. BYD's design removes many of those internal modules. The cells are integrated more directly into the battery pack, reducing unused space, cutting the number of components, and simplifying manufacturing. Fewer parts can mean fewer production steps, lower weight, better packaging efficiency, and lower cost. Safety is also central to BYD's battery strategy. In nail penetration testing, the blade battery was designed to resist the violent thermal runaway associated with some conventional lithium-ion battery designs. That matters because consumers may accept slower acceleration or fewer luxury features, but they will not accept a battery system they believe is unsafe. Then there's standardization. BYD can deploy versions of the same core blade battery technology across vehicles at completely different price points. The platform appears in affordable models such as the Seagull and also supports premium products under brands such as Yangwang, where prices can exceed $100,000. That means BYD does not need to reinvent its basic battery architecture for every vehicle. It can spread research, tooling, supplier relationships, software development, and factory investments across a much larger product range. This is where the cost gap becomes difficult for competitors to close. An independent UBS teardown and manufacturing analysis estimated that BYD held roughly a 35% production cost advantage over comparable Volkswagen electric vehicles. That's not a small efficiency gain. In the auto industry, a few percentage points can determine whether a vehicle produces a profit or loses thousands of dollars per sale. A 35% advantage changes the entire competitive equation. BYD can lower prices, add features, protect margins, or combine all three. A legacy automaker facing the same market may have to choose between losing money and losing customers.
The subsidy and quality myths. Critics often argue that BYD's rise is mainly the result of Chinese government support. There is historical truth behind that argument. China identified new energy vehicles as a strategic industry as early as 2009. Public policy, incentives, infrastructure investment, and industrial planning helped create an enormous domestic EV market. But government support alone does not explain operational success. Subsidies can help a company enter a market. They can support research, encourage consumers, and reduce early financial risk. What they cannot do forever is manufacture competitive vehicles, manage supply chains, improve quality, scale production, expand internationally, and generate sustainable profit. BYD's 2024 performance shows the difference between a protected experiment and a functioning industrial giant. The company generated approximately $107 billion in revenue and around $5.6 billion in net profit. It sold roughly 3.4 million vehicles, including about 1.76 million pure EVs. Those numbers do not describe a small company surviving on a temporary government program. They describe a profitable manufacturer operating at global scale. The second claim is that low prices must mean low quality. That assumption comes from an older manufacturing model in which lower prices usually required cheaper materials, fewer features, or weaker engineering. BYD is challenging that logic by lowering cost through integration, shared platforms, production scale, and fewer supplier layers. A vehicle can still have flaws. No brand is immune from quality problems, recalls, software issues, or inconsistent service. But calling every low-priced Chinese EV cheap quality avoids the more difficult question. What happens when a lower-cost manufacturing system also produces acceptable quality and more standard technology? Tariffs are the next defense. The United States has imposed a 100% tariff barrier on Chinese electric vehicles, shaped across the Biden and Trump eras. The European Union has also introduced additional import duties. These policies can slow BYD in the United States. They cannot stop BYD from competing against Ford, Volkswagen, Toyota, or General Motors in Brazil, Thailand, Indonesia, Australia, the Middle East, or other neutral markets. If a legacy automaker can survive only where a government blocks lower-cost competitors, then the underlying industrial problem has not been solved. It has only been delayed.
Why legacy automakers are trapped. The pressure is already visible in Detroit and Wolfsburg. Ford's Model E electric vehicle division reported a loss of approximately $5 billion in 2024. General Motors has committed tens of billions of dollars to battery plants, factory conversions, software, and EV production. Volkswagen has faced the possibility of unprecedented plant closures in Germany as it struggles with costs, slower demand, and stronger global competition. These companies are not failing because they do not understand electric vehicles. They have talented engineers, famous brands, global distribution, and enormous capital. The problem is that they are trying to build a new electric future on top of an old industrial structure. Legacy automakers carry factories designed for combustion engines, long-term labor obligations, dealership systems, complex corporate hierarchies, and supplier networks built over decades. Every major transition creates internal conflict. Protecting profitable gasoline vehicles can delay EV investment, while accelerating EV production can increase losses before demand and scale are ready. The supplier structure creates another trap. A traditional automaker may depend on multiple Tier 1 suppliers for batteries, electronics, software, motors, sensors, and vehicle systems. Each supplier adds cost and creates another possible point of delay. When one component changes, several companies may need to coordinate engineering, testing, certification, and production. BYD's single ecosystem control reduces much of that friction. This does not mean outsourcing is always bad. Suppliers can deliver specialized expertise, spread risk, and reduce investment requirements. The danger appears when an automaker outsources so much that it gradually loses the ability to design, manufacture, and improve its own critical systems. The warning parallels Boeing. For years, Boeing expanded outsourcing across major parts of its aircraft programs. That strategy was intended to reduce cost and distribute risk, but excessive outsourcing also weakened coordination, reduced direct control, and created dependence on outside partners for systems that were central to the final aircraft. The auto industry is not identical to aerospace, but the industrial lesson is similar. Once a company loses deep internal manufacturing knowledge, rebuilding it is extremely difficult. Factories can be purchased, software teams can be hired, but integrated engineering culture, supplier knowledge, production discipline, and institutional experience take years to restore. Legacy automakers are therefore trapped between two expensive choices. They can preserve the existing structure and risk becoming uncompetitive, or they can dismantle and rebuild major parts of the business while still selling millions of vehicles, supporting workers, paying suppliers, and protecting shareholders. BYD does not have to escape that same structure. It was built for the new one. The global battle for 2035. Trade barriers may slow BYD, but the company is already adapting by moving production closer to customers. In Europe, BYD is developing manufacturing capacity in Hungary. In Brazil, it has moved into a former Ford facility, turning a symbol of legacy retreat into a base for Chinese expansion. Mexico has also been discussed as a potential assembly location. The strategy is straightforward. If imported vehicles face tariffs, build inside the trade zone. At the same time, BYD is expanding rapidly across Southeast Asia, including Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam, while strengthening its position in Australia. These markets matter because many are growing, price-sensitive, and less protected by political barriers found in the United States. BYD is also moving beyond affordable transportation. The BYD Shark pickup targets one of the most protected cultural strongholds in the auto industry, the pickup truck. Trucks are not simply vehicles in markets such as the United States and Australia. They represent identity, work, lifestyle, and brand loyalty. Entering that segment signals that BYD does not intend to remain only a producer of small urban EVs. Its wider brand portfolio reinforces the same message. Feng Chenbao focuses on off-road vehicles. Yangwang attacks the premium and technology-driven end of the market. The Yangwang U8 has attracted attention for its ability to float temporarily in emergency conditions. The U9 supercar uses the DSUS X active suspension system to demonstrate extraordinary body control. These products are not necessarily volume sellers. They serve a different purpose. They show that BYD wants to compete on engineering image, not only price. That creates a dangerous combination for legacy brands: low-cost mass-market vehicles at one end and attention-grabbing premium technology at the other. The next decade, leading toward 2035, will determine whether traditional automakers can respond. They will need more than a cheaper EV model. They may need to redesign supplier relationships, standardize battery platforms, simplify vehicle architectures, localize production, and shorten development cycles. In other words, they may need to rebuild the company while the company is still operating. Those that succeed can remain global leaders. Those that move too slowly may keep strong positions in protected home markets while surrendering growth regions to faster, lower-cost competitors.
What this means for car buyers. BYD's most important achievement may not be one battery, one factory, or one low-priced vehicle. It is the democratization of technology. Features that were once reserved for premium cars are moving into mass-market models. Faster charging, advanced driver assistance, safer battery designs, connected software, and sophisticated vehicle control systems are becoming expected rather than exceptional. That is the new competitive standard. The strongest long-term advantage is not simply having the lowest sticker price, it is having a manufacturing structure that can keep reducing cost while adding technology. That structural cost leadership becomes a moat competitors cannot cross with one discount, one new model, or one government tariff. For consumers, relentless EV competition is ultimately beneficial. It forces every automaker to improve range, charging, safety, software, quality, and price. Even buyers who never purchase a BYD may benefit because the company's pressure forces other brands to offer more. But for the auto industry, the message is much less comfortable. The next global leaders may not be the companies with the oldest names, the largest dealer networks, or the most famous history. They may be the companies that control the greatest share of their technology, move the fastest, and manufacture at the lowest structural cost. So here's the real question. Can Ford, General Motors, Volkswagen, Toyota, and the rest of the legacy industry rebuild their production systems before 2035, or will they depend on tariffs and brand loyalty while BYD takes the rest of the world? Share your view in the comments. Is BYD creating a better future for car buyers, or is the global auto industry becoming too dependent on one manufacturing powerhouse? Subscribe to the channel for more analysis on the technologies, companies, and industrial battles reshaping the future of transportation. And in the next video, we will examine the strategy legacy automakers may use to fight back and why some of their biggest advantages could also become their biggest weaknesses.